whether or not it was realistic to talk about consensus, and it was sort of agreed that that was a difficult thing to strive towards, but could be quite powerful in terms of how effective the recommendations might be coming out of a body if they were based on consensus. And so the suggestion that a definition of consensus should be in the terms of reference for an advisory committee. Talked about a bunch of different working groups. Returning of salmon on the Central Coast, the fisheries, maybe a recreational commercial interface working group, an aquaculture working group that would look at conflicting uses or siting, a local knowledge working group that then could feed into a workshop, potentially, and a regional monitoring and enforcement working group. We talked a little bit about meetings, topics, the focus for workshops and meetings. One of the topics, as I mentioned, could be a local knowledge type of meeting. And as a sort of a foundation for one of those meetings, there was a suggestion to involve the community a little bit more by doing something like distributing blank maps for individual community members to provide their own kind of spatial input. And that would feed into a spatial planning type of workshop. Linking into existing processes, we talked a little bit about the species at risk process, identification of species at risk and recovery plans, and bringing those to the areas and identifying threats and conflicts. And then we talked a little bit about how to weight the authority of advisory processes if PNCIMA recommendations were at odds. And there was a recommendation that the sort of bigger picture considerations taken into account by a PNCIMA process would have some value, rather than just looking at one sector specifically. We talked a bit about the internet. There was a suggestion of doing something like the marine map that they've done in the California Marine Life Protection Act. Also a recognition that the web is a brand new tool for some communities, and that high-speed access isn't available everywhere. And some discussion about video conferencing, the value of video conferencing, and how maybe making that available at the Community Futures Office or the Ministry of Forests or somewhere where people could kind of convene to participate in a meeting remotely. And then we also talked a little bit about better reaching people in communities, and we got lots of good suggestions about that, from using different points of contacts in the communities, to postering, to having a bit of a bigger advertising budget, doing press releases, and getting people's attention by making our posters more interesting. So, I think that am I capturing most of what we've lost most of our group, so. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So let's just, we've just got a few minutes left. We said we'd be finished by now. Are we missing a ferry? You all right? We'll take a few more minutes. Okay. Well, then let's just, if anybody has any final questions or things they'd like to say, then maybe I can ask Bruce and perhaps Alex to say final comments on behalf of the steering committee, which is kind of overseeing the whole thing. But anybody have any final questions or comments that they wanted to make that they didn't get a chance to make before?
Just make one final comment. I think what seems to have been maybe originally envisioned with some of the PNCIMA work was maybe more sort of just ocean use space planning, and the expectations of communities, I think, now have really gone far beyond that, in terms of looking more at integrated management in terms of actually integrated resource management. So I think it's an opportunity for PNCIMA, but it's also going to be a weight to bear in terms of trying to link more effectively with a lot of the other things that are going on, like the wild salmon policy implementation, like First Nations co-management initiatives, because I don't think you're going to be able to be effective or fulfill people's expectations unless you can effectively link with those other processes.
Great, thank you. Did you have something?
Yeah, Rupert mentioned that the Oligans, these draggers catching a lot of williams, and I'm wondering why. Because, you know, a lot of these boats have observers now and cameras. You know, that should not be, if they're catching williams, they should not be doing it there. That's my comment, you know. If they're catching a lot of williams, they got to stop them right there and then. And why are they catching these williams in the first place? They shouldn't be in that area if that's where the williams are. Another comment I have is, I think there's a lot of poaching on our coast, and we need guardianship. I think every First Nation should have guardianships out there, looking around, see what people are raping our land and our waters. So, I think First Nations should be doing that kind of thing. Our people should be hired to do that kind of thing. In every territory on this coast. You know, I hear rumors of people that don't have a license or anything, are out there catching halibut and bringing in all kinds of fish. Why? So that's my comment.
Right. Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, it's talking about guardians, you know. I'll just tell you what usually happens, you know, when we deal with any government program. You know, we had a really good program in our reserve. We had our own guardian, we had a nice little boat, we had nice things, nice land. You know, never failed. Every time we started doing something good, the money was taken away. And that's never happened. You know, that's why I'm always frustrated dealing with, you know, anybody like you. Because, you know, you do a lot of talking, but don't get anywhere. You don't really listen to us. You're just making us think. You listen. You know, you know that's frustrating. You know, it makes me more angry as we go along. Never really, the respect and the truth never really comes out. At the end, you know, we always end up holding a dirty end of the stick. You know, I hate to see that happen. Western's here about working along with you and fisheries. And if fisheries aren't going to be working with us, I think this should be the space out. Get away. We have after our resources for a long time. It's goes on there.
Okay. Thanks for that. Neil, would you like to just go over next steps one more time, and then we can...
Sure. So just to sort of review what happens after we finish this meeting, there's a lot of things that we'll need to be doing, but a couple of the things that are perhaps most relevant to our conversation here is, you know, as we said, this is one of a number of meetings we're having, so we'll be meeting with other communities to have this conversation and hear their interests and concerns. Based on what we hear, we'll take that engagement strategy and try to revise it to reflect what we've been hearing. And then begin to implement the different pieces of it and begin the planning process. So we are still in what we might call the preparation phase and trying to sort of get all of our ducks lined up so that when we begin a planning process, everybody knows how they can participate in that and how they're going to be working with each other to help develop a plan. So our intention is to begin with convening a broad advisory committee. And we want that to happen by June. And then we would begin that timeline on the planning process. So between now and June, we'll be trying to figure out what does that committee look like, who needs to be there, how do we address the interests that we've heard around local input and participation, and how do we reflect that in the composition of the committee. Questions like that are some of the things that we'll be trying to sort of work our way through based on what we've heard. And we'll be coming back out to communities and to interest groups to invite those groups to identify